Welcome to Come Share the Joy with your host, singer-songwriter Debra Schultz. This week's guest is Kasie Cooper. Kasie and her husband Thomas are from Salem, Virginia. They have two beautiful girls, Anaya, 3 years old, and Selah, 6 months old. From the time Kasie was 18 months old, she struggled with health issues. By the time she turned 22, she had been through 22 surgeries. She never knew, though, that her biggest decision in her life was soon to come. Either way she went with this decision would definitely be life-altering one way or the other. What did she decide? Stay tuned for her incredible testimony and story of a wonderful life-changing miracle from God. This is a story of faith, perseverance, endurance, and the reason why we never give up, because it is true that with God, all things are possible. Now let's welcome this amazing woman of God, Kasie Cooper, to our show.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Come Share the Joy, and I thank my guest for coming today. Her story is going to be beautiful, and you're going to love it. I'm here in Salem, Virginia. I'm singing. We've talked before, Kasie, but I never really got to get the whole story, so I thought you all get to hear it too, because this lady has a story, a miracle. You are a miracle. Isn't that awesome? So I'm just going to turn it over to her. Of course, you know me, I'll ask a question every now and then, but she has a fantastic story, so I'm going to let her just take it. Her name is Kasie Cooper, and she is from right here, born and raised, right?
Right.
She has two beautiful children. Anaya, she's a sweetheart, and the little one is Selah. They're precious, but I'm going to let her tell you her story. Okay, you go ahead and you tell my people all about this. You are going to be amazed because it's a beautiful story.
Well, I did grow up in Salem, and from the time I was little, I wanted to be a mom. I always knew that was my hope and dream was to be a mama. And my little brother was my baby from the get-go. He still kind of is, even though he's much bigger than me now and all grown up. But that was always my dream, always my hope, and what I felt like my purpose was in the midst of other things that I wanted to do or felt called to do. And from the time that I was little, I had medical issues. I had my first surgery at 13 months, and by the time I was 22, I had 22 surgeries.
Oh my word.
And so in my early 20s, I landed in the hospital looking like I had had a stroke. They couldn't figure out what was going on, got released a week later with a long list of therapies and different things that I needed. And I had made an appointment months before with a specialist, and I kind of stumbled into her office. My parents were with me, and she said, "I know exactly what's wrong with you," and diagnosed me with late-stage Lyme disease that had attacked most of my major organs. And the most devastating piece out of all of that was the fact that she said my hormones were so shot that I would never be able to get pregnant. And if I did get pregnant, I wouldn't be able to sustain a pregnancy. And being in my early 20s, I was dating my husband pretty seriously at that time, looking towards a future with him. And, you know, that's just a devastating piece to be told when that's been your whole life's dream. And so we ended up getting married. His name is Thomas. He's incredible.
He is. I met him and he's handsome too.
He is. He's handsome. And he told me not to come on here and tell any fibs.
Oh, okay.
He said I couldn't talk about how good he was.
He's
too late.
I watched him with the girls. He's precious.
He is. He's a great husband and great father. But we got married knowing that children were probably not in the picture for us. And or at least our biological children. So we started walking towards adoption, and it seemed like those doors kept closing. And we said we would never do foster care. We just couldn't handle it. But God just put piece after piece in our path. We ended up fostering. And I'll share why that's important in a moment. But as we started our foster care journey, my dad actually sat down with me, and Dad is really good about being able to say what I need to hear, even if I don't want to hear it. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I know you have a heart for kids in foster care. Like he could see the passion that had built in the time that God had, you know, used to call us to that ministry. And he said, but I also think that you should just try. It's not going to hurt to just try and see if you're able to get pregnant. And he said, your mama and I will be here. We will walk this journey with you. You won't be alone. And in that moment, I was like, I can't believe that he, you know, would say that after everything. But I'm so thankful that I did, that I listened. And Thomas and I, we prayed and we searched. And several months after that, we decided we were going to try. I went to several doctors and got clearances on whether they felt like what I needed to do to be ready for that, or as ready as possible, given my health. And so everybody gave us all clear, so we started trying. And about 1.5 years later, we went on fertility medicine. We had struggled to get pregnant. Went on fertility medicine, and a few months after that, we got a positive test. And so we almost immediately, within a few weeks, we started sharing with our friends and family, because we said, you know, this wasn't supposed to happen, and here we are. We're just going to cherish whatever moments we have.
Yes, number one miracle there, right?
Yes. And at the time, we were fostering 2 little boys, and I was absolutely in love with those little boys, and I still love those little boys even now. But we were fostering 2 little guys, and we went to that first ultrasound appointment, and the technician was like, oh, it looks like there was something else here, like a blood clot or something. So the doctor, she said, okay, come back next week and we'll just check, make sure it's resolved. And so we went back the following week at 9 weeks pregnant, and the ultrasound technician, you know, they're not supposed to tell you anything in that room. There's a reason for that. And she showed us the heartbeat. Heartbeat looked great. And she said, but it does look like you had a twin here that likely passed away. Aww. And so we were just kind of sitting back and kind of taken aback of, oh wow, like our baby is okay, but we also just lost a baby. And that's a heavy piece to try to balance, that gratefulness that one's there and the grief that one's not now. And you didn't even know. And so we went back in the room, and it was actually much worse than that. And that is horrible. But the doctor told us, she said, there's a very rare type of pregnancy. And I'll go into more of those details in a minute. She said it's a really rare kind of pregnancy where a sperm fertilizes either an empty egg or an egg that has some kind of issue, and it turns into a cancerous tumor instead of a baby. And those happen quite rare, she said, but having a twin version of that is extraordinarily rare. And we found out later it only happens in 0.01% of pregnancies worldwide. Incredibly rare. And very few successful outcomes in those type of pregnancies. Sure. And so we went from our baby was okay to we just lost a baby to now not only did we lose a baby, but now we also have a cancerous tumor growing next to our healthy baby. And they showed us, and I have pictures of our ultrasounds where you can see the placenta with the cancer, and then you can see the placenta with the healthy baby. And it's quite astounding to see the difference. I'm happy to share those with you. But so the next step was to start meeting with specialists. And she told us sitting there that day, she said, they're probably going to ask you to terminate this pregnancy since it's early on. She said, this is very dangerous for you, and so they're likely going to ask you to terminate this pregnancy. And we walked out of that room, and I don't remember a lot of the next few days other than just tears, a lot of tears. And within hours, we were getting specialist appointments set up. So we met with a specialist, and she shared that the only option was to terminate the pregnancy because the baby, if we tried to carry the pregnancy, the baby would have a 50% chance of survival. But I had anywhere from a 30 to 45% chance that it could take my life. And
it could take your life.
Yes, the pregnancy could take my life. And I'll share a little more of that in a moment too, of what that piece looked like. But So they recommended termination, and I went back to my doctor, my OB, and who is, I credit her so much for having such a big part in helping save my life and the surgery and everything else that I'll talk about in a minute. But went back to her, and she said, well, I do know that Wake Forest has seen one of these cases before. I don't know anything about it, but I know they've seen one of these. I can try to help get you an appointment. So we went to Wake Forest a few days later, and the doctor at Wake Forest said he had seen one of these pregnancies. They made it to 23 weeks. The baby passed away, and the mother ended up with metastatic cancer. And he said, and he looked at me and he said, but it is your choice what you want to do. And
choice.
And I think hearing those words was what I needed. It was my choice. And that's why I talked about foster care. I remember thinking when we came home, I would run across fiery coals if our house was on fire to save my little boys. They lived on the opposite side of the house from us, or the other side of the house from us, from where our room was. And I remember thinking I would run across flames to get to those boys and to make sure they're okay. How can I not just try with this baby? Aww. And you can't cry because then I'll cry. We had to debate. We talked about it. We sought counsel. We talked to our families. And we were so incredibly blessed that everybody in our life that was in our immediate circle of trust, every single one of them looked at us and said, we love you. We love this baby, but we are here no matter what's going to happen.
Right.
And to have that kind of support, no matter what somebody's worldview is, no matter what they believe, to have that kind of support and to know that you were loved no matter what, it was just everything that we needed at that moment.
What a decision.
Yes, it was an impossible decision. You always hear on shows, right?
Oh, sure.
You see it on Grey's Anatomy.
This would be a great movie.
You see it on TV, but to actually live through it was just completely something that none of us asked for. Our families didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for it. And yet there we were. So we debated back and forth what we were going to do. And at the end of the day, ultimately the only person that could make the decision was me. And that was a heavy weight.
I'm sure it was, babe.
And so we went back to my OBGYN, and I actually took a picture. She had a little sign in her room that said, "It's okay not to be okay." And that was my motto for a long time, was it is okay for me not to be okay. And we sat in that room and I talked to her. It was just a couple weeks before, or it was right before Christmas, I believe, when I met with her again. And told her, I said, I just have to try. I just have
Gotta
to.
do it.
I've got to try. And so she said, okay, we're going to set you up with this list of people, and here's the next steps, and here's what kind of monitoring you're going to have, but we'll know more once you meet with these specialists. So the next step was to sit down with a gynecological oncologist. And my husband couldn't get off work, so my mom went with me. And I think we both left feeling like we were going to fall through the ground afterwards. It was so much information. And she also was just a phenomenal doctor. I was so blessed to have the medical team that I did. And she listed out, she said, okay, I know this is your decision. I understand. I want you to know what this might look like. And so we began to talk about the possibilities for me. I knew there was a good possibility I could lose the baby. It was very, very likely. But for me, it looked like metastatic cancer.
Cancer, yes.
Most common with this type of cancer is to your lungs and your brain. But it could have been, pretty much anywhere. I also was told sudden seizures, sudden hemorrhaging. There was a very high chance that I would need a full hysterectomy or a partial hysterectomy, lose organs. And numbers were starting to be thrown out. And it's interesting because I've occasionally gone back. What we did was we would record a video to send to family and friends after our visit to Wake Forest.
Right, and everybody got to hear the same.
Yes,
That's smart.
We didn't have the capacity to be able to share with everybody. So we would call Thomas's parents, my parents, and sometimes one or two other people, and everybody else we would send a video to. It was the best way for us to communicate and survive at that time. And so looking back at those videos, it's interesting because some of those statistics and things we were told changed over the course of those months. But so all the things I'm telling you might be a little different if you watch those videos, but it's because we learned new information or things like that. So the oncologist sat down and explained, here's all the possibilities. So like I said, metastatic cancer. One of the biggest risks was sudden hemorrhaging. And we were told that if we saw blood, we needed to be in the hospital within 30 minutes, or there was a good chance they couldn't save my life. And that's
Can I stop right here?
Yeah.
And you're carrying all this.
Yes.
Knowing that you have a baby in your womb. And that all you had to do was make that choice.
Yeah.
And you chose not to. My word. A lot of prayer, huh?
Yes. Well, and I think that was one of the biggest pieces for us, right? Was in the process of doing this and sending videos, after our Wake Forest visit, or right before our Wake Forest visit, my mom said, "Can I share this with some of my friends to pray?" And I said, "Sure, Mom." She shared it on her Facebook. And it kind of exploded.
Oh, that's like a snowball effect, right?
And so we ended up having a Facebook page of people that would pray for us. And we had people as far as Portugal that we know is praying for us. The day I went in for surgery, we had around 1,000 people that we know of praying for our family, which is just incredibly humbling. This is now 3-ish years later from when this was happening, and I met a couple 2 weeks ago, and they said, "Hey, you're so-and-so, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah," and they said, "We prayed for you." And I was like, that's so humbling to know that people not only prayed for us, they remembered, and that they loved us from a distance that much.
Prayer changes things, doesn't it?
It does. So, and Facebook is great for communicating and keeping up with people. And I'm very thankful that we had that as a tool. Because it was really helpful. But yeah, so we walked through the next many months. At the end of that year, it was actually January 1st. I remember because my deductibles went.
Time to start over.
I started having symptoms, and they said, "You need to get to the hospital right now." Went into the hospital. It was still during COVID. They put me in a back room. My husband's phone didn't have service, so he wasn't getting updates. And it was not the baby. I had COVID, and I just had weird COVID symptoms. It was the strangest thing. But we made it all the way to, they told us the goal was 24 weeks. If we could make it to 24 weeks, there was a good chance they could save the baby. And so that was the goal all along. So I remember getting to 24 weeks and just having the biggest sigh of relief, knowing there was still a lot of possible complications.
Right, you're thinking, well, my baby may have cancer too, right?
I wondered about that, and they told me that shouldn't be a thing. So that was one good thing. I knew that shouldn't, or not couldn't, but shouldn't be a thing.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't know, what's this going to look like? Intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, hearing loss, all of those things. And we would love her no matter.
You know that.
But we still wanted her to have the best of everything that she could. So just like all parents do, right?
Certainly.
And so we prayed for much longer, but we'll skip ahead. We were so incredibly blessed to make it to 34 weeks. And we had a planned C-section. Went in, and I was going for scans all the time, and they were watching things, and every time there was a slight scare, they'd have me in to test things. It was a lot of hoopla.
You're kind of like your research.
Yes, exactly. They call me their special child. And at 34 weeks, we went in, and my cousin actually works at the hospital at Debradd, and he was on he's an anesthesiologist there.
Okay.
And he was he was aware of the meeting that happened when they planned my surgery, because they put a team together from all different categories. So instead of having a baby on the labor delivery floor, I had a baby on the cardiac floor. Just because, yes, they said it was much easier to bring the labor delivery stuff to me than to bring the heart stuff to them. So they already had blood prepared because they were expecting a lot of hemorrhaging. And that morning, or the night before, we thought my water might have broken. It didn't.
Wishful thinking, right?
We didn't want it
okay.
because we wanted our team. But we had a very specific team lined up, and we wanted only, the best of the best. And thankfully, it wasn't my water that broke. But we got to spend the night in the hospital the night before. And that morning, at like 4 a.m. or so, a nurse came in to tell me they were going to take us. And she came in and she said, "Can I pray with you?"
Oh,
and so we sat there, and nurses came and prayed with us.
that beautiful.
And we went down to the third floor, or I think it was the third floor, the cardiac wing, and we had a literal line of doctors and nurses out the door because I had to sign form after form,
Love your heart.
acknowledging risk and all. It was chaos. My cousin that works there tried to come in and see, and he said, "I'm skipping the line," and opened the other side of the curtain. And we got to, we had to sign just tons of forms saying that I understood all the risk. And at that point, you're thinking,
Let's just
I don't have any choice. It's not going to stay in here.
Uh-huh.
But I very much remember my mom and my husband were there at the hospital with me. My in-laws were in town. In the event something happened, they wanted to be here for my husband. My brother came in town to stay with my dad so that he wasn't alone. Because, COVID, I wasn't allowed to have people there at the hospital. But we had all of those people there and accessible if my family needed them. And we had, like I said, we know of about 1,000 people that were praying for us that day. Churches from all over the greater Roanoke Valley, Montgomery County, even as far as Portugal, like I said, and just incredibly humbling. And so I just remember laying on that bed, signing those forms, and everything was said and done. And the nurse, Beth, she said, "All right, it's time to go." And she said, "Can I keep your phone with me and I'll take some pictures?" Because I had to be put to sleep.
You're right.
And the chance of hemorrhaging was so high, they didn't want me to be awake in case something happened. It would, cause extra issues. And so they rolled me back, and I just remember rolling back to that room, knowing I might not wake up, and just knowing that if I didn't wake up, I was going to be in the arms of Jesus.
That's right. What do we got to lose, right?
And just mostly just praying my baby would make it at that point. We had fought so hard. I think the piece for me that I learned later on that was the most powerful, when we walked through all of this, my motto was, I have to choose faith. Faith was never I grew up, at a religious home. I became a Christian at a young age. I knew that the Lord loved me. But faith wasn't necessarily a natural state for me. Sometimes for some people, I think
we like to take it in their own hands, don't we?
Yes, very much so. And I am very much an organizer and love to have everything just so. And going through this, I kept saying, I have to choose faith. I have to choose faith. And we had so many people watching too, believers, non-believers.
Yes.
We had some missionaries who, they're college students they work with, actually asked us why we would do this because we were crazy. And we got to live out our faith in front of people. And then after the baby was born, and for most people, what that looks like is, okay, here's a nice little box. Everything was wrapped up so nice and tight. It looked beautiful. Here's a nice story. The reality was like it is for most people, right? It's messy. And it wasn't done when the baby was born. We still had the cancer. We still had the mental health side of things, the PTSD. And going through all of that, it became, instead of my faith is on display, which was absolutely real and raw and very messy. People got to see a lot of my faith on display. And quite often my faith struggling on display too, right? Especially the people at our church that heard the updates every week, and my family and stuff like that. They saw the very real, raw emotions. But for the most part, they saw somebody that was choosing to trust. At least I hope that's what they saw. That was our goal all along, was to choose to trust and to choose to have faith. And then when we got to where it wasn't so public, then it really became an internal battle. And I had to keep choosing even when nobody could see it. And that's much harder, I think, for sometimes to, in those still small moments, right, to choose.
Sure.
I'm going to trust even when I could get by with not, when I could.
Would have been easy.
It would have been easy to just let that spiral happen and just be mad or be bitter or angry. And I certainly had plenty of that too, sure. There have been a lot of those moments of, why me, or
Sure.
Lord, why did we need to go through this? He's shown us over and over, how he's used it, certainly at this point. But I share all that to say, once I was going through the later stages of everything, had a conversation with my doctor, and she actually told me that what was so interesting about the positioning of our pregnancy was our baby, our surviving baby, her placenta was sitting directly underneath of the other placenta that had the cancer. And the way that it was situated, she believes that that's actually what prevented me from hemorrhaging, was that the placenta was cutting off enough to where the tumor couldn't cause me to hemorrhage, which could have very likely cost my life. And so I think that's the most beautiful piece of, I didn't know those pieces when I was going through it. I didn't know that my daughter was in there protecting me just as much as I was protecting her. And yet God used her to save me just
She
as
saved
much.
your life.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we named both of our daughters. Our other one never had a heartbeat, but she had genetic material.
That's right.
And we know that she would have been a girl. And so her name is Asenath, which is Egyptian for she belongs to her father. And her middle name is Catherine, after a very special lady in mine and my husband's life, his great aunt. She was like a grandmother to both of us. And she passed before we had any of our own children. And then our surviving daughter is Anaya, which means God has answered in Hebrew. And her middle name is Ruth Elaine, which are our mother's middle names. And then our youngest daughter that we just welcomed this year, this past year, her name is Selah, which means to stop and think about what God has done.
Look what God has done.
Yeah,
girl.
Which is absolutely our story of our girls.
It is, and it's a beautiful story. Wow. Just makes you want to cry. Faith.
Yeah. And choosing. I think for me that was really what it was I had to make a very conscious choice to choose faith.
Is the things hoped for. Evidence of things not seen. To know that you have this cancer in you, and it would have been so easy to take care of it at an early time, but you had faith to say, no, God, I choose life. It's beautiful. I love you, and you're so precious. I need hugs from that. Wow, and thank you for being my guest on Come Share the Joy, and they're going to be so blessed because we're just going to keep up with you. And these girls, they are something else. We had dinner with them, and they are cute as they can be.
They're a mess.
They are. Thank you. I appreciate you, Kasie.
Thank you for
God bless you, and look what God has done. Let's just call this program Faith. We'll call it Faith. Kasie, what a beautiful story. My, you could be such an inspiration to so many people. There's ladies out there hurting. Every circumstance is different, but our hearts hurt, don't they?
They do.
And that faith has got to kick in, doesn't it? So would you tell them a little where they can find you? You would like to travel.
Yes.
Anywhere you need her to come, she'll do women's groups. She'll even come and just give her testimony to your church. So call Miss Kasie Cooper, and give them your phone number.
My phone number is 540-986-5873. And like you said, I love to travel. I'm happy to share and just share always in love.
Awesome.
I always share in love of how the Lord worked in our life and how we can choose to walk in faith.
Yes, amen. And we're going to put on your website, and we'll put on how to contact you. Okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
God bless you.